All right, in this video, we're going to start looking at how to interpret the data and put all the puzzle pieces together before you meet with Toast and go through a symptoms and examples sheet. So ultimately, what we're trying to do here is put together all of the information and have a hypothesis about what might be going on for the client. And then when they come into session for the assessment, hopefully we have an idea of where we're going, but depending on what they tell you, you can always change gears in the symptoms and examples sheets. But for right now, let's go and explore what's going on for Toast. So Toast went in and finished all their forms. And so you can see that secondary set of forms that was sent out has come back in. So we can look at these and see if they verify our hypothesis of ADHD. And looky here, we are positive for some alexithymia traits, we're positive for some camouflaging traits, and we're positive for perseverative thinking. Right now, the PMDD screen is not coming up with a color, and so this is a great example of how to use the information button feature in Seidr. So if we click on the PMDD, and we click on the little information button, it's going to tell us a little bit more about PMDD and like where you might want to go with that information. Oftentimes this tells us what is a score, what's a positive score. It's not right now, but 11 is significant on the PMDD. There'll be another sheet in your packet that talks about the significance of the scoring of all of these pieces. But like it says right here, the higher the score, the more likely they're experiencing this. So, and then if you just like scroll through the PMDD, they checked yes for a lot of the things. So this is something that you would want to explore with them as well. All right, so let's go back and look at the initial forms. So when we look at this, it looks like overall what's going on for Toast is some possible alcohol use. Overall well-being is in the moderate levels right now. Toast is positive for ADHD, as we talked about earlier. And it also looks like Toast is dealing with a trauma background, since we're seeing this pop up as well. A thing that I like to get curious about here with the MDQ, this is really helpful. Where's the MD? There it is. If we click on the MDQ and I'm like, well, what is this really telling me, right? So we're not positive on the ASRM, but we are positive on the MDQ. Like, what's that all about? And so what you can do is click on the info button and look at what the basically information about the MDQ is and how that can show up when we're looking at primarily neurodiversity traits. So I won't read all of this. I'll let you explore this when you're working with the software on your own. But some things in the MDQ that are important to pull apart is if they were getting much less sleep than usual and didn't really miss it. Oh, Toast said yes. So this is something that we're really going to want to get curious about in session. You know, what does that look like for you? How long do you go without getting sleep? Do you not feel tired? Does this happen often or rarely? Or are there reasons behind it? And that helps you pull apart, is this more of like a bipolar issue or is this neurodiversity? Another one that's important to look at is, were you much more interested in sex than usual? Toast clicked no. So these are all things of how we pull apart basically, is this a mania or hypomania, along with neurodiversity traits. So right now when I look at Toast data, I am thinking, all right, this looks like definitely some neurodiversity because of our follow-up data. My primary hypothesis is ADHD. So that's the line of questioning I'm going to go down. Some other pieces that are really important to look at as you're preparing to see the client is all of the data that doesn't pop up here, which is our developmental questions. So we'll click on those. In another video, I'll share with you some developmental questions that help point to some autistic traits. But looking at the developmental sheet, it looks like we had no premature birth, delays in talking, delay in walking, or held back in school. Often these cue us into if there might be neurodiversity. The delay in talking and delay in walking is a classic sign of possibly autism traits. And IEPs in school, oftentimes if they clicked yes for this, I will ask them what the IEP was for, because it might clue us into some of the other neurodiverse traits. So a classic one with this is dyslexia can also be a part of the neurodiversity house. And so potentially they were held back in school for reading, and then when you ask the client about it, they're like, oh yeah, I wrote my fives backwards and I had a really hard time with my words because everything was backwards. That just clues us into some possible neurodiversity. Our environmental looks at ruling out or needing to check in with the client about possible fetal alcohol syndrome. So that's what these two questions get out here. If the client's mother drank or used substances significantly while the client was in utero, you would want to potentially explore fetal alcohol syndrome, which is not something we can pull apart in Seidr. I would recommend that you take that to supervision of how your particular clinic or practice is approaching fetal alcohol syndrome, but that's what this helps pull apart here. Lower body weight and smaller than peers, that's another thing that cues us into neurodiversity. The family history is really helpful, as most of the things we are looking at with neurodiversity are on our gene codes. And so these are things that would be passed down generation to generation. So if there are father, mother, brother, sisters, grandparents, or siblings who are positive for certain things, we would want to get curious about that with the client. So this is a great example with Toast in session. I would ask, hey, I noticed that you had noted that your father had ADHD or ADD. I'm curious if that was diagnosed or if that was suspected. And if diagnosed, you can have a little conversation about what that looked like, maybe a little bit of their experience, and that helps clue you in that the client might also have this because it's passed down in the genetic codes. Depression, anxiety, thoughts of suicide, these are all pretty common with folks with neurodiversity. And then so ultimately this just helps kind of pre-screen what might be going on for your client, and then you can check in your session about these different pieces. The other thing I want to look at is their wellness. So this really looks at some of their basic needs. It's really hard to address other things in mental health if, say, folks don't have housing or they don't feel safe or secure where they live. So this is what the wellness questions get at, and giving some background on the client. When we click on our trauma, that's also getting a little bit of a trauma history, so that helps us understand more of like what's going on for this client. As we can see for Toast, it looks like in their adult life there was some physical violence or assault or trauma, and then childhood there is a trauma background as well. So I hope you're starting to get a better understanding here, like how we put all of these puzzle pieces together with all of this information. The next piece I want to look at is their medication history. So this often clues us in as well of some neurodiversity, or possibly what other medical professionals or counselors or psychologists or psychiatrists were potentially looking at or diagnosing this client with. So it looks like Toast has a bit of a depression history, which is all lining up with their initial data, right? Toast has been on Zoloft and Lexapro and noted that they had side effects. So this is something I'll check in with the client about during the assessment. One of which is, are they currently taking these medications? Are they finding them effective? Are they experiencing side effects? Those are all great questions to ask your client. Oh, looks like they also tried Wellbutrin. There's no notes on it, so that would be one that I would ask about as well. Are they currently taking it? Did they find it helpful? Doesn't look like Toast was put on anything else as of yet. So yeah, not a significant medication history for Toast. Doesn't look like they've been in counseling before. Sometimes when clients come in and they're curious about having, especially ADHD, an interesting thing to check for is if they've actually been on a stimulant. And so our stimulants are right here. Looks like Toast has not been prescribed a stimulant yet. And so it doesn't seem like Toast has been diagnosed with that. When I look at this medication history, what I'm seeing is that Toast was probably diagnosed with anxiety and depression, or just depression. So this helps clue me in of what's going on for the client. Those are all of our kind of background information pieces. And I think at this point, you're pretty much prepped to meet Toast and go through a symptoms and examples sheet. And what we would start with is exploring the ADHD symptoms and examples, which we'll get into in the next video.